Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to take a static website and make pop-outs and call-outs and really cool elements for like a marketing video for a client. This video was inspired by one of you awesome viewers. This is Bruno. He had a client where the product was like an online product and he wasn't sure how to make a cool video out of it without either just talking heads or screen recordings. I'm going to show you how to take a website and turn it into a really cool animation using Apple Motion. Today we're going to be working with this website. This is a real client called List with Freedom. They are an online business, so there's really no product to show. This is the product. So we're going to make this website look really cool. The first thing we need to do is get great, clear still images of the website that we're going to bring into Apple Motion. So the way I do this is I take the website and I take a screenshot of it by just hitting Shift-Command-3 on my Mac. And then we can open it up here and open it with preview and then save the file. And so now that I've got the top of the website, I actually want to like showcase a lot more of this website without shrinking it way down to compromise the resolution. So the next thing I'm going to do is scroll down a little further and take another screenshot and again till I get to the bottom of the page. Okay, now that we've done that, let's jump into Apple Motion. The first thing I'm going to do is bring in those 3 images that we created and drop them in. We're going to want to make sure the top of the page is at the bottom of our project pane and the bottom of the website is stacked on top. So you see the reverse order here, 1, 2, 3 going up in my project pane. I'm going to turn off 2 and 3. And I'm going to sort of polish up the top of my page here. I want to crop out this junk at the top and really just get the website nice and clean. And I'm going to move this up to the top of my screen. And now let's turn on the second screenshot. And we're going to match this up using the crop and repositioning so that it aligns with the first screenshot. And then to align the third screenshot, I'm actually going to select here my group. So this is now selecting all 3 of these images. And I'm going to head on over to the inspector and crank up the Y value. So now we get lower on the page. And let's match up this, just using the crop and the repositioning. Now we've got a lot of junk here on the left and right sides of the screen. So I'm going to grab my group here and I'm going to scale this up. So now it's nice and clean. If we want to look at everything we've got, we can just play with the Y value just to see how it looks. So now what we've done is we've taken the widescreen aspect ratio of my computer monitor and what I can see at once on that website. And it's almost like I can see the whole long website here in Apple Motion. So this little group that we've just created is like the basis of our whole project. It's going to be really important. And so for that reason, I'm going to rename this group so we can keep track of it. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is go up here to add object at the top center of our screen. I'm going to add a camera. Let's say yes, switch this to 3D. And I am not going to worry about that camera for a few minutes, but I just wanted to establish it there. I'm going to collapse in my project pane this web page group that we made because I'm really just not going to do much with it for the time being, and I just don't want to look at all of those layers. What I'm going to do now is have that web page selected in my project pane, right click, hit duplicate, and now we've got a replica of that initial page. Now, this is really important, these steps we're about to take. Because we're working with the camera, we need to make some adjustments to this group. We are going to head on over to the inspector window. Up here, I want you to be selected on group in the right of the inspector window at the top. And we're going to check flatten and layer order. That's going to be really important for us. So I want to focus on these 4 plans that List with Freedom offers, and I want to isolate them using the crop feature. So what I'm going to do is turn off this bottom web page here. So when I crop, I can see where my crop lines are. So I've turned that off. Now we just have the List with Freedom web page copy. I'm going to rename that at this point to silver, because right now we're just going to crop out that silver column. And let's crop. Okay, now let's turn on the web page. And we're going to make some keyframes on this silver group. So we're going to make sure we're selected there in the project pane. We are going to go to, I don't know, 1 second in. We're going to create a keyframe under properties, under position. So I'm going to make a keyframe here under position, but I'm also going to drop down this little arrow so I can see where my values are. Now I'm going to jump to 115 in my timeline. You can see that here, 115. I'm going to make keyframes again. On the position line, I'm going to hit this top keyframe. So I have keyframes for all of my values. And now we're going to play with the Z and Y position. So I'm going to bring this up to, let's say, 725. And I'm going to change the X value to be, let's say, minus 135. Okay, and you can see here in my canvas that some of that column is cropped out. I'm not going to worry about that quite yet. So now let's play it back so you can see what happens. So you can see it comes forward and slightly to the left. So now we need to do the same thing with the rest of these columns. So what I'm going to do is duplicate my silver column. We're going to call this gold. And I'm going to, again, turn off the other two elements in my project pane so I can really focus on this gold column. I'm going to head on over to properties. I'm just going to adjust the crop to isolate that gold column. And now we need to adjust the position of this because I want it to stay on the same Z position as our silver column, but I want the X value to be a little bit different. So I'm going to turn on that silver and I'm going to jump to the second keyframe on our gold group here, and I'm going to adjust the X value. Okay, and again, we're going to do this with the next two columns. And while I'm doing this busy work, guys, I just want to remind you that this is my new YouTube channel dedicated to Final Cut and Apple Motion. If you have not subscribed to that channel, hit that subscribe button for me. You can also subscribe to my main channel too, but if you're interested in this specific content, this is where it lives now. Okay, so let me catch you up. I've isolated each of those four columns. I've adjusted the X value so that they are kind of evenly spread out on my screen. So if I play these back for you, you can see what happens here. All of the columns come forward on the Z axis at the same rate and at the same time. I'm going to stagger these keyframes a little bit so they come in one after another, just to give it a little more visual interest. So I'm just grabbing these red keyframes here in my timeline, selecting them both in each group by hitting the Shift key and kind of giving a stair-step effect. Let's see how that looks. Perfect. This looks great. Now let me turn on our web page, the full web page, so you can see how this looks. Okay, and I know this looks a little crazy right now. It's kind of hard to see. Everything's jumbled up. You've got the full web page behind these columns, and it doesn't look the most attractive. So why don't we do something about that now? I'm going to select the full web page here in my project pane. We're going to head up to the top of the screen, hit Filters, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And now this filter shows up in our inspector window here. We're going to keyframe this blur. So I'm going to queue up my playhead to just before the silver column pops out. Do you see that here in my timeline? I'm going to queue up my playhead here, and let's add a keyframe under the Gaussian blur in my filter tab in the inspector window. I'm going to turn this down to 0. The default is 4. We're going to make sure it's crystal clear. And then just as the silver starts to pop out, we're going to add another keyframe, and we're going to dial up that blur significantly. Now let's focus on the camera. The camera is not something I've talked a lot about yet on this channel. I think you're ready for it. Let's get into this. So what we're going to do is select the camera at the top of our project. We're going to create a keyframe here on position. So we've got keyframes for the X, Y, and Z values. We're also going to create a keyframe right here on scale. Then let's head down to our timeline, scrub over just when the action starts to happen on the screen. And let's make another keyframe again on all three positions and the scale. And let's change that Y value. We're going to make it a negative number. And we're also going to play with the scale. Now, the lower you go with the scale, the tighter things zoom in on the camera. And the larger you go on the scale, the smaller things get. It's kind of the opposite of what you would expect to happen. If you're seeing these like crazy grids, these are what are called the 3D overlays. And if they're distracting and annoying you, just hit view and turn off 3D overlays and those will go away. Okay, we're getting somewhere, right? The next thing we're going to do is add a light. What a light will do is it'll make these columns cast shadows on the surface behind it. So what we want to do is head on over to the top of our screen, hit add object, select light. And now our, our columns look really backlit, don't they? We need to make some adjustments here. So let's head on over to the Z value and we're going to crank that way up. And then let's head on over to light because it does look a little dark, doesn't it? And let's crank up the intensity. The next thing we want to do is in the inspector window, check the shadows box. And let's hit this drop down show. If you're not seeing that show drop down, just hover your cursor like right here and it appears. And you just press that and you get all these other options. There's a lot we need to do here. Obviously, we need to crank up the softness a ton. There we go. And we need to like dial down the opacity so they're not so dark. I mean, I want like shadows, but I don't want them to look crazy. Let's move on to the next part of this animation. We're going to focus our attention on the camera. Now, if you recall, we've already made a couple keyframes on the camera. I'm going to jump to 5 seconds in our timeline and let's hit the properties tab in our inspector window. We're going to add a keyframe for position and a keyframe for scale. These are our hold keyframes. If you don't understand keyframing, I have a really important video I'm gonna link to right here. It explains everything you need to know about keyframing and how they work. So if you're a little bit lost here, I would go back and review that and then come join us on this one, okay? So now what I'm going to do is jump another 15 frames and add 2 more keyframes. Again, one on position, one on scale, and we are going to play with the y-axis and come further down in our screen. Let me just play back everything we've just done so you can remind yourself. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is highlight one of these reviews. Now you can't see it. I'm gonna go to the web page group to show you what I'm talking about. We're gonna go to filters. I'm gonna turn off that Gaussian blur for a second. So down here, you can see this website has reviews of their product. So I'm going to take this second one in and I'm going to highlight it. So what I'm going to do is right click on this big web page group that we made at the very beginning of this video. We're going to duplicate it and I'm going to drag it all the way up here underneath my camera. And now the first thing I need to do is head on over to group. Remember this step? We're going to select flatten and layer order. That lets us do a lot more with the camera with this group. It's a really important step. You don't want to forget that. Let's head on over to properties and I'm going to crop out this review. And I'm going to turn off my main web page so I can see where my crop is. Okay, we've got that cropped out. I'm going to have this little box pop forward toward us, just like we did with these columns. So once the camera sort of reaches it, I'm gonna have it come forward on the Z axis. So I'm selected on review in my project pane. I've got my playhead queued up to in between the camera, the second camera moves we just made. Let's go on over to inspector, properties, create that keyframe. and then come a little bit further in the timeline, create another position keyframe, and let's bring this up on the Z. And I'm also going to bring it up on the Y, and I'm going to bring it over on the X so it's centered in our frame. All right, so I'm going to turn on my big web page here. And on the web page, I'm going to go back to filters. If you recall, we turned off the Gaussian blur. And so now you can see what's going on here. Now, if you watch in the animation, you'll see that this element passes the light. We're going to fix that later. Let's not worry about that quite yet. What I am going to do is head on over to the shape tool, and I'm going to draw in a rectangle over this text because we're going to have this text right on. And let's head over to our inspector window, head on over to shape, change the style from outline to fill. And I'm going to play with the color of this box until it blends in with our image. Perfect. And I'm actually going to also make sure that the rectangle is starting way over here at the beginning of my timeline. And now you can see that rectangle moves with this image. And the last thing we're going to do is add the text that's going to type on. I'm going to hit the text tool here at the bottom center of the screen. We're going to click anywhere in our canvas. And I've already transcribed that review, so I'm just going to paste it here into my inspector window under format. And we're going to make some adjustments here. The first thing I'm going to do is make that text black so we can actually see it. And we're going to go over to format. We're going to make it much, 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 much smaller so that it fits in our little box. And I think the line spacing looks off. And now that we've got the text in there, we want to add the type on effect. So I want to make sure in my timeline here, my text isn't coming in until after the camera has finished moving and my pop-out box has come forward all the way it's going to on the Z axis. Now I'm selected on my text here in my project pane. Let's go on up to behaviors, text animation, and type on. And now if you look down in my timeline, I get this purple bar that says type on. It is going to type on, but it's going to be real slow. It's going to be the whole duration here of my element. I don't want that. I'm going to grab the end of that purple bar and I'm going to change the duration to 1 second. And now let's deal with the lighting issue that we have here. Let's head on over to light. So now I'm going to create a keyframe right where the camera starts moving. It's going to align with my camera, but I'm highlighted on light. We're going to add a position keyframe, and then I'm going to jump to the next keyframe on my camera so you can see it here. And I'm going to add another position keyframe, and I'm going to bring that light even further forward on the Z axis. Let's do that value and see how it looks when we get, yeah, great. So now this is nice and bright. Now let's play everything back so you can see how it looks. Great, and now we're going to do one more camera move here. So I'm going to select camera. I'm going to create keyframes for position and scale. We're going to jump another 15 frames, create keyframes again for position and scale, and we're going to fly up on the Y axis, and we're actually going to go forward on scale. So we're going to reduce the scale value, and we're going to zoom in to this section. And now we're going to have the Zillow, Trulia, and Realtor.com logos come forward along with the text that's above it. Let me turn off that blur so we can see what it says. Listings on local MLS and also featured on these sites. So now I'm going to drop in those 3 logos. I already have them handy. And now we can't even see them in our frame because we're so zoomed in on the camera and we're all the way down on the Y value on the camera. So I'm going to zoom out my canvas and you can see this is where this group of logos is. Let's just, on the Y value, bring them down. Here they are. I'm going to zoom back in so we can see. Obviously the Zillow logo is much higher res than the other two. So I'm going to scale it down, make these fairly even, and I'm going to reposition them over the logos that are actually on the website, about the same scale and position. Okay, I'm going to turn the blur back on our web page now that I've got those sort of where they belong. And I want each of these logos to scale up and reposition a little lower. So let's get to maybe this point in our animation. I'm going to create a scale and position keyframe on each of these logos by selecting each one of them in the project pane and creating these keyframes. Now I'm going to jump a little bit further in my timeline, create new keyframes for each of these, and we're going to play with the Z position, of course. And the last thing I'm going to do is replicate this. It's hard to see, it's fuzzy right now, but this line of text as well. I'm going to grab that from the website. Let me show you a little trick. If you open up the website in Google Chrome, here's the line that we want to grab. Now, first of all, I can just copy it, the text exactly from this website by highlighting it and hit copy and paste. But let me show you the other thing I can do in Google Chrome is if you right click here on one of these words and hit inspect, we can find the font. See this? It says Open Sans. So now I can replicate that font exactly. I know which font they're using. And so I'm going to highlight this just to copy the exact text. We're going to head back on over to Apple Motion. I'm going to select the text tool. We're going to click anywhere in our canvas, copy and paste that text. We know we want to change this color of the font to, I don't think it's quite black, it's more like a dark gray. And then let's go back and change the font by going to Format, and it was Open Sans. All right, this text, I'm gonna have it fade in. So we're gonna go to Behaviors, Basic Motion, Fade in and fade out. I'm also gonna have each of these logos fade in and fade out. And I'm going to have them scale up on the Z axis at different rates. So just like we did with those 3 columns, they kind of stair step in. Great. And now let's work with the light to make sure these objects are lit really nicely. So I'm going to go back up to the top of my timeline, cue up my playhead to the camera keyframe, the last set of 2 that we had made. Let's click up onto light in our project pane. We're going to create a keyframe here. We're going to look down again at the timeline, find the last keyframe we made for the camera motion, create another keyframe for the light. Okay, you guys, let's take a look at our finished website animation. So you guys, what do you think of this technique? Apple Motion saves the day when it comes to clients that have just like a website or an app as their product. It makes their product look so much more dynamic and it gives them such a wow factor. They eat it up. Let me know if you liked this tutorial by giving me a thumbs up, letting me know in the comments, and of course, hitting that subscribe button. I'll see you guys again.